Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Respecting the Beer. My name is Gary Arndt. Got another great lineup today. With me again is the historian of hops and the man who doesn't have to worry about daylight saving because all of his clocks are permanently set to 5:47, Mr. Joel Hermansen.
Wow.
But am I wrong?
No.
Oh, that is brilliant.
The look on his face was like this eye-opening, like, is that true? Wait a minute. It probably should be.
Wow. That was outstanding.
Also with us, the good doctor is currently applying for a government grant to study the quantum effects of beer foam, Dr. Allison McCoy-Fleshman. And we got back on the show, the shrink of drink, Eric Eastman.
That almost came out my nose.
What is happening right now?
I'm crying.
That's awesome.
You're witnessing a professional podcaster
Yeah.
in his element. That's what you're witnessing.
Yes.
Goodness.
Wow.
Okay. Go team.
I am so calling you the shrink of drink. Oh my gosh. Wow.
That is one heck of a compliment.
Okay.
And lost in the shuffle, yours, the grant on quantum foam. That
Yeah,
was,
it's all in the bubbles, I hear. The bubbles.
Yeah, wow.
Fascinating.
holy.
Quantum foam is technically a thing.
You're right. Yeah, no, that is legit.
Yeah.
Quantum foam is a thing. I don't study it. So, but you know what? I could. Why not?
Gary, the best in the business.
So last time you were on the show, we talked about a whole bunch of different psychological elements with regards to selling beer, our enjoyment of beer, a lot of things like that. And this is kind of a continuation of that discussion. So you also have a podcast. I've listened to it, and you've talked about how our brains work. So I have a very simple question. We have Allison. We got Joel. Joel likes 547. Allison likes MSB. Humans fundamentally have the same sensory organs. Yet, his taste buds and his brain says, I like hops. I like this bitter taste. And Allison's comes up to a different conclusion. I like this other thing.
Malt.
How is it that there are some things generally, I don't think there's anybody that doesn't like ice cream, yet we have such different profiles when it comes to things we like in terms of like taste. How does our brain get wired that way? If we could go back in time and change something in Joel's life, could he wind up an MSB drinker?
We could change so much in Joel's life. That would be the start. Where should we begin? No. Honestly, it comes back to the whole debate, nature versus nurture, the whole combination of genetics and environment. Mere exposure of certain tastes early on in life can make a difference into what we prefer. So just that as a starting point, that can be an influential entity to what we're interested in, as well as any sort of minute influences that can shift us in certain directions of not even what we are predisposed to like, but little tiny influences that lead us in certain directions. Different types of influences, different types of things that persuade us in various directions.
One of the, and I don't know if there's, I read something about this a while back, but children don't like Brussels sprouts, right?
That's just wrong.
They hate it. But a lot of people will not eat Brussels sprouts for a big part of their life, and then as an adult, they will try it, and they're like, well, this isn't bad. This is not what I remember. First time a lot of people ever taste beer, they don't like it. It's I don't, which is probably good if you're a kid. And then later in life, it's something we appreciate. You're ready to say something.
I am. I'm so all I can think of is people's experiences when they walk in to McFleshman's and they see Joel. So we will just talk about
Many of them run.
Oh,
absolutely. They run, yeah,
Towards me.
the bar.
right to him for many different reasons. But there are influences that Joel brings every time people come into the bar. Two specific routes of persuasion. Joel will wow them with the information that he has tucked into that brain. Think of Cliff Clavin from Cheers. Okay, just filled with information, trivia nerd, okay? And that's going to be central route of persuasion, where the information about a particular beer, specifically in this case, 547, can sway people towards 547. But then you have his peripheral route of persuasion. That's going to be his excitement, the way he carries himself when he talks about it, the facial expressions that he makes, the just sheer energy that he brings to it. You look at any sort of influential person. So, do we have any Kiss fans here at the table?
You know me, no.
I'm
right,
not
right.
a
Okay,
Kiss
so
fan at all. I appreciate what they're trying to do, but
do you really?
No.
No, okay.
I don't.
So, like, if you take the band Kiss and if you listen to their lyrics and their music, for people that are music connoisseurs, it would be pretty limited. So their central route of persuasion would be limited for many people. But their peripheral route of persuasion, that's going to be the show they put on, the makeup that they have, the light show that they produce. Influences people to really love the experience. So some people, when they walk into the bar and they see Joel, they're going to be influenced by the information that he's given. That's going to be the central route of persuasion.
Black and white makeup on Joel.
About to say
Done. It's a done deal.
Yeah.
we'd like to have an all-staff meeting.
Yep.
Just as an aside, I listened to a fascinating interview with Gene Simmons where they talked about the business decision in the 70s never to be seen without their makeup. And there were people that were offering like $10,000 for a picture of Kiss without their makeup on. And they were like fanatical about this, and it was just to keep the mystique up. And he was like real honest about it. Yeah, it was a business decision. That's all it was. And they did that for ages. And then when they finally did a tour without their makeup, that was a big thing because that wasn't a show. That wasn't what they were doing.
Yeah, 100%. That
funny.
is amazing. Yeah, that is so cool. That those business decisions. I mean, people go to get an MBA at the best universities in the world. The first class they take is the business behavioral finance. That's like the first class they take, which is totally psychologically driven. So that makes total sense.
So let's assume that I walk into McFleshman's Brewing Company and Joel is not on staff that night. Let's say it's a Tuesday and one of our
You
other...
just come back on a Wednesday.
And you go to Jack's Apple Pub.
One of our other amazing beer tenders is there. So what are there things that aren't people-driven influencers but still affect response?
So absolutely. If you look at any sort of level of associative learning, like if you take any sort of like, let's take a negative connotation where I eat a ham sandwich and I have a bad experience with the ham sandwich. There could be something called an overgeneralization, right? Where anything that is remotely close to a ham sandwich, I'm going to avoid, right? But then if you look at a place like McFleshman's and you walk in and you might not have the bartender that you want to have, okay? And in some cases, that could make people walk right out the door.
Oh, man.
Right? And that's going to be
All of our people are lovely,
No,
I promise.
I'm going to get to that. That's called discrimination. And then they might want to walk out. But when you have a bunch of the same beer tenders that portray and create the same vibe and the same aura, and you have beyond people, the woodworking, the lack of TVs, the socialization.
The bar mirror, too, I feel. Is
the back bar.
Mirror. Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that John O'Boyle, one of your previous guests on the show, talked about was the intelligence of not only the beer tenders, but the people that come into this place. I think that in and of itself creates an association that generates real positivity, and it actually increases the desire to drink beer and
Makes beer taste better.
makes it taste better. Yeah, exactly.
Me think McFleshman's smart.
Sounds good.
You sounded like Kevin from The Office.
I know.
That's funny.
Me, no.
So, you mentioned Kiss do you think music has any role in this? And you and I have talked about, like, I think there's better music to drink beer and to visit with people with. And no offense to any Kiss fans out there, I don't think Kiss is that music, but I think there are musical tastes that align with that vibe. Am I missing something on that? Is that true?
No, absolutely 100%. Again, when you look at those associations that people make, I think it can really sway people's experiences. There is a brewery in the Midwest that if I were to walk into that brewery, the music that they played would turn me off immediately.
Right.
And I'm not going to say what that music is or what that brewery is, but they have wonderful beer. But it would not taste good to me because
The Kid Rock House of Hops.
Well, you mentioned Kid Rock, and I'm not going to talk about Kid Rock, but
That's more of a meth type drink. Music, not beer.
yeah, meth lager, yeah. So Hulk Hogan has been generating some waves, and he's going to be coming here, and that is when I was talking about like a peripheral route of persuasion and influencing beer drinkers. It has nothing to do with the beer whatsoever. It has absolutely to do with this persona. And then when you look at, to get back to your question, when you look at musical tastes, there's 100% ways where certain music generates this calm community type of vibe. And then there's going to be certain music that generates individuality. And then there are going to be certain musical tastes that's going to generate excitement. I mean, you look at nightclubs that play, they play the music because the kids like it, but they also play it because it creates this energy where people are going to be active and be moving, and they're going to drink, and et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, absolutely, music is going to play a huge role.
That's true.
In that.
Etta James nightclub doesn't necessarily have the same sort of bouncy vibe as a really good Etta James
Okay,
nightclub.
I just love that you mentioned Etta James.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, Etta James, Bill Withers, like you just keep bringing them.
Right. Oh,
Keep
good
bringing 'em,
music.
yeah.
Okay, I have a question. So in my the Science of Beer Tasting class, of which I believe you were a student, as well as the previous podcaster with us, John O'Boyle, I have a quote that I really appreciate, which is, taste is the most honest communication we can have with ourselves. When I'm talking with folks from all walks of life of beer experiences, half the folks will say, I don't know what I'm supposed to be tasting. And so they won't share what they're actually tasting. And I try and encourage them, just say words. Doesn't matter. There's not necessarily a vocabulary. You taste what you taste, and you like what you like. Can you answer to that of, is taste really honesty to ourselves?
So I think I have two directions that I can go with.
Let's do both.
answer.
Go team.
So the first direction I would go with is to, let's say, people that live in northern Alaska. Okay, I know this is random.
Love
but
it.
They have 33 different words for snow. So they have these descriptors.
Actually, I think that makes sense because of the different crystal structures that ice can undergo. Let me check.
Hey, everybody.
This is the nerd section of the podcast.
It's actually because they put adjectives into the word.
I love it. But they have these distinct phrases and words that they can use that can be descriptors. And that allows them to impact the way they think. And that's called linguistic determinism, where
Ooh.
language influences thought, right? So when you're having people that are not super familiar with beer try to describe the taste, if they don't have the language to describe what they're tasting, they may have a difficult time thinking
Articulating. Oh,
about
okay.
what they're
Yeah.
tasting. So that would be the first direction that I would go in. And now I can't think about the second one.
Well, it's because there are 19 forms of ice. 20 depending on who you ask. I think that's still in peer review. But anyway, there are 19 different ways. So you said that they have how many words for ice?
For snow, 33.
Oh, for snow. Oh, 33. Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah, but
that's...
you only experience one form of ice at the pressure and temperatures that
Well,
humans.
don't make it unfun, Gary. Sorry.
So, beer.
Does this have any? Do you remember when you and I did the beer tasting and we tried to identify beers?
Yeah.
Do you remember how poorly that went?
Oh, yeah, it was atrocious.
Wait, did y'all?
Yeah.
Was it blindfolded? What was the?
Yeah, it was-
Walk me through this.
I don't know that we were blindfolded, but it was
It
blind.
was blind tasting.
Okay.
Yeah, we didn't know what we were drinking.
Yeah, yeah, and we both went into it kind of thinking, oh, well, this is like an IPA tasting. Of course, these are beers that we're really familiar with. We're going to totally nail this, and it couldn't have gone any worse.
So this is why I love Psych, because we can go in so many different directions with this. But in this case, what is like super cool about this conversation is, number one, we're going to experience overconfidence. We're always going to be more confident than we are correct.
Right, and that
Always.
never applies to me. So.
We got laughter in the
Oh my
cheap seats
God.
back here. But number two, when you have like two beers that you think you can tell the difference between, but you have the beer right in front of you. The difference between, let's say, two different West Coast IPAs. If you are not a super sensory taster, right? There's something called familiar. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No.
Yeah, there's something called just noticeable difference, where, and it's according to, there's Weber's Law and all this sort of stuff, difference threshold, where these flavors are really indistinguishable to us. We're just not sommeliers of beer. What is a sommelier of beer called?
The Cicerone.
Thank you so much.
Actually, he is.
I'm a level 1 Cicerone.
Are you a level 1 Cicero? Right.
I'm not even that.
So you're working towards it. You're a level 1 and still can't discern between those two flavors.
Keep failing, Joel. You keep failing.
So hey, keep
My goal is to fail forward.
fail forward. You become president of the United States. This is not a political podcast. I don't mean that in a. I think anyway.
okay.
Let's move forward. I can talk about
Let's fail
Abraham
forward.
Lincoln failing forward. Okay, let's move on. All right. So, but you know what I mean. Like with that difference threshold, you're a level 1
Cicerone.
Cicerone.
Level 1 Cicerone.
And you couldn't discern the difference between two IPAs that are fairly similar. And that is just all based off of experience, based off of expectance, what you expect to have. And then it's also based off of motivation. Like, how motivated are you to taste the difference? In the situation where we were like taste testing those beers, we weren't highly motivated. We were just having a good time getting, a little tipsy, whatever. But if it was an absolute contest, we'd prepare for it. We would, do taste testers ahead of time, those types of things, and we would have much greater experience doing it, and we'd become better at it.
I was about to say the different tastings that we've done. Bobby and I trained with the Siebel Institute, which is a basically a beer school, have these kits to where you can train yourself and understand your threshold level of different off flavors. And I do this in one of the beer tasting classes where we douse one of our beers with an intentional contaminant. And everyone's like, oh, that's so gross. And, oh, this is, I can taste the butter, or I can taste the cardboard, or I have spared everyone from baby vomit.
Thank you.
Because that one's really gross. But the idea is that when we've
Never
done
had
these,
buckhorn beer?
Oh God. So when you do these trainings, it is brutal because you start with a very low concentration of, it's typically like we'll douse them like PBR and we'll do various concentrations. So we'll taste one that has basically trace amounts and then we increase the concentration, and everyone has their own card. And you start to mark, and they're all done in triangle tests to where you don't know if it's two beer. So there's 3 beers in front of you. One of them is different. And you don't know if the one is the contaminated one or the 2 are the contaminated one. And you have to pick out the difference. And so you keep doing that until you actually can successfully pick out all the differences. And that gives you your threshold. It takes hours. It is brutal and boring. And that sort of training that you have to do would be for every kind of compound present in the beers, which are, it could be thousands. So this is where your beer judge certification program judges get their training to actually, it's not really tasting beer at that point. I mean, it is, but it's a whole new world.
Beer is not nearly as bad as wine.
Oh, I don't even want to know about that.
That
Oh my God.
there's not a $100 bottle of beer, but there's
Hold up.
You can get a $10,000 bottle of wine,
Oh, that's fair.
and there are also there's more that goes into wine. I think because roughly most brewers, by and large, it's not perfectly true, are using similar to the same ingredients, or you can. Most brewers are not farmers, but wineries grow their own crop. And so you can have, oh, this is, from Australia, this is South African, and so, oh, well, this is a French Bordeaux, so it's got to be good, or it's expensive, therefore it has to be good. And I remember, I've had $100 bottles of wine, and they were good, but they weren't necessarily the best wine I've ever had. I think a lot of that isn't, and I think that goes into a lot of it too. Like there are certain beers that I've heard people here talk about, like Pliny the Elder, and it's Pliny.
We say Pliny.
But they achieve a legendary status, and when you try it, it's like, well, I have to like it because everyone likes it. It has to. This is right.
Right. That's called normative social influence. Yeah,
I've
you're
always called it the
exactly right.
Citizen Kane effect.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yep. Same thing.
Or it could be the opposite. Well, with Citizen Kane effect, it's like everyone thinks, oh, it's the greatest movie ever, and then a lot of people watch it. It's like, well, it's not the greatest movie I've ever
That's what
seen.
I think about The Godfather.
Sacrilege.
Godfather's a fine movie, but
Right? I knew
yeah.
all the puns and all the
the
jokes,
Sight
and
and
then I
Sound
saw it. And I
Decadal
was like,
Survey has come out ever since
That's fair.
1950, whatever, and like Citizen Kane has been number one on all but two of them.
Yep.
But it's not that everyone thinks Citizen Kane is the best movie. It's that more people think it is a very good movie. Generally, not necessarily the best. But when people see it and they go, well, this doesn't, change my world. It's good, but it's not great. And I guess I'm talking about two different things. One is the expectation of like, this has been so highly touted that if I don't like it, maybe there's something wrong with me.
Oh, I see. Well,
go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, so I did a quick Google search because this is the kind of podcast we're doing today, and for top beer ever sold, and it's Arctic flavored beer, which is Alsop's Arctic Ale. He who gets the title for the most expensive bottle of beer in the world, a record amount of $503,300 was offered for a light ale at an auction. The taste properties of the beer turned out to be nothing to do with it. The history of the Arctic beer attracted the attention of collectors. Apparently, the ale was brewed in 1852 for a polar expedition and was salvaged from some downed some sort of ship that was wrecked somewhere in the
Oh, I've
Arctic.
heard about this. Was this found in the Baltic Sea,
Maybe.
like off Sweden?
1854, found the north. Let's see.
Because I think they did a chemical analysis on the beer to try to recreate it.
From London to the Canadian Arctic in 1845 to find the Northwest Passage between the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans. This is the purpose of the expedition. Shortly before the departure of the search expedition, Belcher used the London brewer Samuel Alsop to brew a special batch of ale. It was bought by a collector in Oklahoma for $304,000, and then
That's more a historical object than no one's drinking that. They're
I
not
don't
gonna
believe
open
so. No, but still, you said that there's not over $100 bottle of beer, and I said
But
counter
no one
to
would
that.
drink that and expect it. Like, there's been a bottle of wine that was owned by Thomas Jefferson that sold for like $1 million.
That's fair.
But no one's buying that because they're not going to pop it open and think this is a great bottle of wine.
But wouldn't that be lovely if that also was the point of like it was actually worth the value of the taste? Maybe not.
I think
I
there's
got a
a-
big eye roll from Gary. I understand.
I think there's a point, maybe a
History's
century,
important.
at which case it's not going to.
I'd like to think that molecules have value too, but I guess it's all the history that matters.
Okay. What about Fiji water?
I love that stuff. No, this is a great
It's
example.
because it's in a square bottle.
It's
isn't
in a
it?
square bottle.
in a
that's-
square bottle.
That's heavier than any other water bottle. That's why you like it.
And I maybe I've convinced myself
Sure.
that it tastes better than other water.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think if I did, based on our earlier taste test experience, in which I was, and thank you for not saying what I was 0 for 6.
Oh wow!
I would never say that.
Yeah,
Do you know what avian is spelled backwards?
naive? Yeah, but I the normative reference, I totally
Normative
agree.
social influence. Yeah.
that.
Yep.
But I have totally convinced myself, because I always view it like, oh, I got a really hard day. I'm going to treat myself to a Fiji water. And you get that square bottle, and it's like 3 times what the other
heavy.
water is.
Yeah.
Don't you
And-
complain about certain other members of your household enjoying coffee at higher exorbitant prices?
Yeah, but we're talking about, first of all, this happens like once every 5 years.
okay.
Yeah.
This is not a common occurrence.
Is it quennial? Is that
But
what that is?
I have convinced myself that water is so much better than other water.
Yeah.
And I don't
That's
think it probably isn't.
This reminds
No,
me
it's
of
not. It's not. No, it's
Probably
that.
tap
It's
water.
not.
It's
Yeah.
tap water from Kenosha.
It,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter.
I
yeah.
am completely.
You
Well,
know,
probably
when-
thanks
when-
to the Northeast Wisconsin Land Trust, where they have purified the water. And
Oh,
that's probably
goodness.
where
Yeah.
they're getting this really fancy
As
water
someone who's
from.
been to Fiji, it's just water.
It's just
just
water.
water.
Yeah. To get back to the normative social influence that Gary had been chatting about a little bit, like very briefly, when people walk in to McFleshman's and you're bartending, Joel, and you're like 547, 2 or 3 of us will be like, yeah, having 547s as well. Awesome, delicious, wonderful, right? And right there, you can share with them what the flavor is. That would be informational social influence, right? Or they can have a little bit of exerted pressure on them, where myself and Christoph and maybe several others are saying, I'm having a 547 too. I'm having 547 as well. And then all of a sudden it becomes the norm. And it's like, all right. And then you have Gary, who's going to buck the norm no matter what, right, Gary?
Pretty much, yeah.
If somebody says that it's black, you're going to say it's
Purple.
okay, very good. Yeah. And so most people, minus Gary, are going to be heavily influenced by the norming of others. And that's going to influence. And this is what's super cool as well. So I take a sip of 547 and somebody watches me drink 547 and I take a sip of it and I make that face like, holy cow, this is so good. They look at me and they see that in their mind, they have these mirror neurons in their frontal lobe. They are experiencing the same thing that I am. They are actually participating in that experience with me. So when they see me drink that and they watch me drink that, their brain is doing the exact same thing. So when they take a sip of it, they are much more likely to love the beer.
So we've had some fun. Bobby and I will once in a while, we'll sit in the beer garden and kind of hide away. It's really hard for Bobby and I to hide when we're here. People come up to us, which we love, talking and everything.
You're not that tall, so
We're not that tall, so it's easy.
Bobby.
Yeah,
but,
well, he's not that tall either. But anyway, every once in a while, we can just kind of sit in the corner and just watch. And we noticed, this was last summer, we had our cherry cider, and we started putting it, instead of the Nonic glasses, we were putting them in the Pilsner glasses, which they really show off a lot more. Yeah. And it was interesting. So you would see someone walk out with one, and then you'd see a couple heads turn, and then all of a sudden, when the next group went in, they would come out with one. And it was just like a kind of multiplicity going on. Of like people noticed, and they're like, "Oh, that's a pretty beer," and so they went and got their own.
And that was my second point way back when we were talking about how important taste is.
There you go.
And my second point was dealing with sensory interaction and dealing with normative social influence. But that sensory interaction of seeing visually that sort of the color, the foam, and you like the foam molecules.
Yes.
I like the
Bubbles.
foam look. I have a relative who actually does photography for beer and other spirits, and how important it is to have the correct amount of foam present to get people that want
Absolutely.
Yeah, right. So that's super interesting how big sensory interaction plays a role. Yeah.
Look at that
in
lacing.
how important that is. And I see that you have a curved glass, and a curved glass is going to lead people to actually drink faster.
I like
So
this.
psychologically,
Well, and
yeah.
what's funny is I put chapstick on earlier because it's still cold out. Well, it's not cold outside today, but I've only got lacing on one side because that's where my chapstick was.
If you curve it enough, you just get a funnel. And that'll get people to drink really fast.
I did that in college a lot.
No beer funnels here.
All right, do we have any more questions for the Shrink of Drink?
Oh, that is such a great name.
It is.
Well, we're going to have him back on, so no.
There's a reason why I'm not susceptible to peer pressure. I have
Why?
no peers.
Aw.
Nobody
love
is
you,
equal to you, Gary. That's what you meant, right?
Yeah. So that concludes this episode of Respecting the Beer. Make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast player so you never miss an episode. Join the Facebook group to get everything between the episodes and the Patreon page where we do have things that don't appear on the main podcast. And until next time, please remember to respect the beer.